with you, everybody. That was Turned Away by Chucky Booker. I'm stepping up to the plate because I want to be one of the very few who drops evidence, who drops the truth based on evidence, peer-reviewed research, PhD dissertations, all of the top stuff, because we caught up in a mind game, and as long as they can keep us reactionary, we'll never be proactive. And one thing I'm not finna do, I'm not finna play with people's egos. I have no problems adjusting my teaching, but show me your evidence. I'm not finna get into shouting matches, debates, none of that, because at the end of the day, when you debate me with your religious texts, I have historical evidence, anthropology, archaeology. I have things where we can go see and touch and present what our ancestors actually did. So, a psychologist named Dr. Edwin Nichols talks about two things that drives the humans, and that's the need to survive and the need to thrive. And when our ancestors built those pyramids, built those civilizations, they were in the thriving mind. They weren't in a survival mind. We are in a survival mind, trying to pay our rent, take care of our kids, etc., going from paycheck to paycheck. But our ancestors had enough time on their hands to where they was able to sit and contemplate the stars, count the stars, invent math, science, etc. And in dealing with people, what I said in the beginning, in dealing with people who likes to debate and argue, don't come with emotion, don't come with anger. Because when you approach things scientifically, not with anger and emotions, most people don't want you around. And what I'm going to be dealing with within these next few episodes of my podcast, it's not a podcast actually, I'm going to be dealing with the origins of the human family. I'm going to be answering some questions that I've been hearing over the years and even recently. One question that I'm going to deal with on a later date: how did human life originate in Africa and migrate into Europe? And one thing I want y'all to understand real quickly: you can't understand who the Moors are unless you can understand how life originated in Africa. Because a lot of what they did and what they've accomplished came right out of those kingdoms and nations that came from the very beginning. Understand, there's no such thing as Greece or Greek. When people are saying the Greek civilization did this and did that, they were not calling themselves Greek at the time. It didn't exist. It's an illusion. It's an illusion that they've created, which has become our reality. So when they talking about Greece, they talking about a Mediterranean basin. Parts of Italy, Sardinia, the Isle of Crete, the west coast of Turkey, Anatolia. The northern part of Africa, what they call Israel. Yesterday it was called Canaan. All of this was Kushite kingdom. All of this was inhabited by Africans. And what you end up having is Europeans coming down out of the mountains, the northernmost climate, above the 51st parallel. They're coming down in waves, and they're meeting African people. Like, before the Romans were in Italy, there was a group of people in Italy, called the Etruscans. They were black. If you look at the date and time, see one thing you gotta understand: establish the timeline, do the math and research, and history will erase the mystery, like Professor James Small say. But these Europeans, they're coming down in waves, mingling with African people. But they inhabited this mountainous area called the Latium Mountains, which is where the word Latin comes from. But these are Germanic people coming from Germany, Norway, Sweden. If you look at a map, they got lines going across. Well, it's above the 51st parallel that literally cuts Europe in half. Eurasia, actually. It cuts it in half. And above that 51st parallel, that's where you get these Germanic tribes from. Same people who would eventually later come and destroy the Romans. Now, one thing I want to share with y'all. Well, first, I'm going to try to keep all my little videos, this ain't a podcast, I'm going to try to keep all my little videos under 30 minutes. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. I'm going to keep it short. I ain't going to wear y'all out unless y'all want more. And I'm going to get to a lot of information that I'll be posting about, that we'll be talking about. But one subject that I'm going to deal with today really quickly, and this is going to be short. Who were the real Americans? Uh-oh. Now, okay, I had to get to this little page first. Yeah. Who were the real Americans? Now, before I begin, I'm gonna share this book with y'all. It's gonna show backwards. But here's a picture. It's called Racial Matters. The FBI secret file on Black America between 1960 and 1972, written by Kenneth O'Reilly. If you haven't read this page, well, I'm sorry, if you haven't read this book, which is over 300 pages, if you haven't read this book, you can't debate me about racism, white supremacy, black versus white. You can't debate me. Read this book first, then we'll see if we have a debate. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. Who were the real Americans? Now, over the years, and even most recently, and you know who I'm doing this for, nephew, you have black people that claims, some black people that claims that their ancestors and elders never came here on slave ships. They were indigenous to America. They were here already. Then you get black people that argue, oh no, everybody that came here on slave ships. If your ancestors came here and settled in the South and were slaves, you came from Africa. Everybody has their own ideology and their own identity about what they subscribe to. There's evidence of slave ships and slave ship logs, etc. But there's also indigenous Indians, or whatever you want to call them, that was already here. And a lot of people can trace their lineage back to that Indian tribe. So, I listen to both sides of the argument and I wonder, what's the conflict? So I do what I do best. I research. And what I've come to realize is y'all are both correct. The problem that I'm seeing most people have, even the great scholars of our time and yesterday, everybody has their own expertise to where you master. Okay, you got one like the indigenous Africans or the Indians, and they study everything there is about Indians. Then you have the other side who studies everything about slavery, and they're experts in it, but they can't agree. But see, those Europeans, whether the history a lie or not, they gonna agree. Yep, they said it, they did it. They don't care if it's true or not. Them Europeans go come together and agree. So why can't we agree? And what I found out, like I said, is that y'all are both correct. The problem is y'all don't put the shit together. Start putting things in perspective, in order. Like I said, do the timeline. See what time, place it took. Stick it inside the historical timeline, and if everything adds up and match up, bam, you got a winner. So that's what I did. So, as I said, here's my evidence. You can go research yourself. You ain't got to believe a word I say. Just think. Think for yourself. Use the logic, reason, and intellect that was bestowed on you by God. Think for yourself. But I'm going to give you the evidence for you to do your own research. That's all I'm doing, giving you my research. Now, again, who are the real Americans? Straight to the point. All human beings originate from Central and South Africa. Period. Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop says that there are 6 forms of the human family. Now, I'm going to skip down. Now, I can go into detail on another video if you guys want. Just shoot me a message, like, comment, whatever, let me know. The Homo erectus means standing up erect. Man stands up erect, or the human stands up erect. The Homo erectus is the first evidence we have of life outside of Africa. The first evidence. So that means the Australopithecus robustus, the Australopithecus gracile, the Homo habilis can only be found in Africa. You can also find the Homo erectus in Africa. However, when it comes to the Homo erectus, you can find him everywhere, all over the planet. So when I say that human beings originate in Africa, Southern and Central Africa, that's facts. There's no debating that. But it's from there you get the Twa and Mbuti people and the Khoisan tribe. Now, I've done a little research on them, and I believe the Bantu mix, the Bantu out in West Africa and Nigeria migrated to the southern central area, which was a hunter society, ran across the Khoisan people, who was a gatherer, nuts, berries, and stuff like that. They came and intermingled, which created the Twa and Mbuti. Even though you still have Twa people, even though you still have Khoisan. The Twa people were of a darker complexion, or a darker hue, so to speak. The Khoisan people, if you look them up, I've posted pictures of both tribes. The Khoisan people have more of a lighter skin. They're high yellow or brown, and they have those slanted eyes, almost Asian looking. However, the Twa people and the Khoisan people is what you come up with after the Homo sapiens evolved into the first families. And when I do my lecture on the origins of the human family, I will go more into detail about the Twa and the Khoisan. But however, from there you get the Twa people, the Khoisan people, and they fanned out north and northeast, west and south. They fanned out all over the place, all out of Africa, all over the world. So, humans come from Africa. Everywhere, every other place we find bones, no matter where they are, every place we find bones of a dead human from thousands of years ago, if not millions of years ago, they migrated there from out of Africa. Like Lucy, they call the bones Lucy, which is the Latin word for light, which means it shed more light into the distant past. Before they found those bones, we could only trace humanity back 100,000, maybe 200,000 years ago. But the skeletal remains of the one they call Lucy dates back 7 million years, which lets us know humans been around for a long time, especially black people. Do your research. The European race only been here about 5,000-6,000 years. So, let's continue. The first Africans that migrated into America is called the Paleo-Americans. Now, they came into America from the East Coast, from Africa all the way into the East Coast. And they came from a sea current called the Benguela Current, Benguela. They came in from the Benguela Current, coming out of the central southern part of Africa. And they sailed and came through the Amazon River through South America and peopled the planet from south to north. So basically they came in from South America, which is the Amazon River, right above Brazil, came up through Venezuela, Mexico, which is where you get the Aztecs and the Mayans. You get those people. Now, the second migration And Dr. Claude Anderson talks about these people a lot. If you don't know who he is, look him up, check him out, get his books. I got a few of his books. I don't have all 5, but he's an amazing historian, especially when it comes to African history. And he actually worked under President Jimmy Carter. Man, I mean, when it comes to American history, untouchable, unfuckwittable. But he talks about the Clovis Folsom people, which is the second migration into America. See, the problem that we have is the ones who don't believe that Africans was already here but came on a slave ship, the ones who believe the slave ship story don't know about these other migrations. The ones who do believe that that African people was already here don't know about migration stories, which is why they're so disconnected from Africa. I'm not African, I'm Indian. Well, here we go. The second migration, the Clovis Folsom people, they're a bit taller than the Twa people and taller than the Khoisan people. The Twa people and the Khoisan people were between 3.5 to 4'11". The tallest was 5 feet. But the Clovis were taller than them. And there's also evidence of an African woman found in San Diego, California, dated back between 90,000 and 80,000 years ago in San Diego, like I said. And they named a tar pit after her called La Brea Tar Pit. And I think they did a TV show. Ain't have nothing to do with her, but it's called La Brea. You might want to check that out. But her bones date back 90,000 to 80,000 years ago, and they found her in America as well, African people. Now, the third migration was another group of people from Africa called the Algonquin people, the Algonquin. So far we have the Paleo-Americans that migrated, the Clovis Folsom that migrated, and the Algonquin people. Do the dates. The fourth migration is called the Inuit, I-N-U-I-T, Inuit, or Eskimo. And we know about the Eskimo people. No need to go into detail with that. And now, here's where we get those Asiatic-looking Indians or indigenous people, the ones who look more red and yellow and Chinese. They look more like that. The fifth migration of people are called the Mongoloids. Now, these were the African people who were escaping Genghis Khan invasion, the whole Asian invasion and stuff like that. These people was escaping warfare and famine. They was migrating out of fear. They were fugitives of terror, basically, and they was fleeing in large numbers, running from Genghis Khan and others who, because Asia had a whole lot of war and going on and stuff. And these were the African people who came across the Bering Strait. Up until that point, you might have only gotten the Eskimo people to come across the Bering Strait, but it was mainly the Mongoloids who was escaping. Because there was a point in history where, and I believe one of the ice ages destroyed their land bridge. Asia and America was connected by a thin piece of land that was eventually destroyed. But up until that point, people was migrating across. And it was up until, October 1492, maybe? You started getting Columbus coming over into the Americas, which we know now that he didn't discover America, but South America. But to give you a little more insight on these situations, you have a zone glaciation, which was above the first parallel. You have 4 ice ages. One was the Gunts Ice Age, which was in Europe, but in America the ice age came, from the top down. So in Europe it was called the Gunts, but in America it's called the Nebraskan Ice Age, which means the ice came all the way down as far as Nebraska. Then there was an interstitial period, which means a warming trend. And then 75,000 years ago, you get the Mendel Ice Age. Then another warming trend. Then the third one you get is the Riz Ice Age. R-I-S-Z-E. Now, this ice age in America came down as far as Illinois. And the fourth ice age, which is the most important, is called the Worm Glaciation. WURM, the Worm Glaciation. And the reason why this is the most important is because this is where you find Africans migrating into Europe. This is where Africans find their way into Europe above the 51st parallel, which I told you before, and they got locked inside of this ice age, locked in caves, because they wasn't aware of this ice age that was taking place, which is you had to adapt to survive or die. And so they adapted, and I'll go more into detail about that. I don't want to give my linchpin too early. But again, who were the real Americans? You are not separate from African people that's on the continent. You are not separate from the Africans in America. You are not some fucking tribal people who's so disconnected from your ancestors you just refuse to acknowledge them. You're not some Hebrew Indian or some Moorish Christian. You are African people.